when we talk about the little guy here in the functional breakdown of the systemic breakdown of the US economy and the banks, we're thinking of the guy who got foreclosed on, or the resulting recession that came after and people lost their jobs. There's a Bitcoin, I think there's a more important little guy thing scenario to this, where I think a few small, I struggle to say elite. I don't see Sam Bankman-Fried as an elite. I just see him as like some guy who fucked a business up, who has these connections, right? But like him, Mashinsky, anyone else in this Three Arrows Capital, anyone else in this previous period who've essentially fucked this market, they've caused not just a problem for the little guy in the US, but they've caused a problem for the little guy in El Salvador who bought into Bukele's dream, who invested in Bitcoin. And if it gets worse, if there's like really draconian regulation or restrictions that is highly damaging to Bitcoin, they've damaged the guy in Belarus, or they've damaged the guy under an authoritarian state, whereby or the lady who needs money and she can't access money because she's not allowed. All these people who use this as a tool for freedom in less privileged countries, that's the little guy they fucked, who've got this final tool for freedom. And that bothers me. Bothers me a lot. This is why I think the work that you're doing, David Zell's doing, that's trying to defend Bitcoin is super important. Do you think we're at any serious risk with Bitcoin, or do you think it's got too big now?
I don't think we're at risk of, let's say,
outright ban.
Yeah, but I do think the one dangerous area is, KYC, AML, know your customer, anti-money laundering protections. I mean, look, in the 80s, it started because of the drug money. And back in the 80s, you could have a treasury official come take your whole bag of cash and you never get it back just because they found a little trace of cocaine on it.
Dude, if you get on a plane with more than $10,000, they can take it and not give it back.
Right.
Here in the US.
Yeah. So they'll so no one likes you having or using large amounts of cash. And that was really to combat the drug wars of the 80s. And then we had the 2001, September 11th thing. So everyone suddenly is like, we need to stop the terrorists too. And now there's a third thing that's added to the FATF, which is the Financial Action Task Force. This is an international conglomerate of all the different countries. They're focused on the proliferation of finance, like how North Korea might be getting money from crypto, which is why, just not to promote my nonprofit, but what I'm trying to do with Value Technology is show the Department of State how Bitcoin mining works and how it works in a way where we could, help the United States to preserve us against these others. But the BSA AML stuff, Peter, for the little guy, it's become like the bouncer at the club. It's made the club more exclusive, And the problem is the bouncer's supposed to keep out the really bad people. Someone's going to. What if the bouncer, doesn't let in somebody that just wants a beer that was able to get it last week? And that's what I think, because of the reliance of our system on who's the customer, making sure they're not a terrorist, is become so exclusive that it actually bars people from the financial system. Some people it shouldn't be.
So what would be the right regulation? Some people think none. Let us figure it out. Some people say regulate the exchanges. I certainly don't think any regulation on unhosted wallets is particularly bright. But what is, and this is obviously just your personal perspective, but what is the right types of regulation that you would agree with?
Well, I think we need to get rid of the $200, or we give some sort of de minimis tax advantage. So if you have Bitcoin, it's under $200, you used it to buy coffee or whatever, that shouldn't be taxed. That's something that I think we could actually let Bitcoin grow a little bit in the United States.
That's in the Lummis-Gillibrand bill,
yeah. Yeah. It's been pushed around for a while. And I do think that regulation of the exchanges is important after this. It's not perfect, but as you were saying before, it's important with what Dodd-Frank does and the systemic risks. Whether it's FTX or Binance, you're going to need some regulators there. Just overlook what's happening to make sure the little person isn't getting screwed.
How would you do that if it's offshore?
So the question would be then, what would be their appetite to operate in the United States? So one of the proposals is, even if I have let's say I have a bank in England, but I want to operate a foreign branch in the US, then I have to come under US regulations. So you can operate without being in the US, but you run a real danger because they always talk about the long arm of the law. Like you can go in, if you touch one U.S. customer, if they can prove you touch one customer, you're under U.S. regulations.
And they'll come after you.
Is that what happened to BitMEX?
Essentially, yeah, wasn't it?
Well, I think BitMEX, if I'm not mistaken, they were offshore. They were, I think it was Seychelles. Am I saying that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, the way the CEO handled it, I don't remember his name.
Arthur Hayes?
So,
Yeah, was not very good for sort of dealing with regulators. And the one tip I would give that would probably upset a lot of your audience, but I'll say it anyway, is don't be disrespectful to regulators. It's kind of like just in life, just don't be respectful people. So the first thing he did was to say, like, come and get me mother effers, on Twitter to the authorities that were trying to, like, that's not a good way to start the process.
it's kind of legendary though.
Yeah.
It is kind of like, I will give the legendary, F the man kind of thing, but
But they did come and get him.
they did, and that's what I'm saying. And that's my point, right? Don't think because you're operating outside, in some small country that's tax advantaged and everything else, that doesn't mean, because the U.S. market is where a lot of the gravy is, so that's why they're going to want to operate in this marketplace. But I also think that beyond the exchanges is that we need to have some sort of disclosure system, and maybe it's the crypto exchanges that once they get in together and are regulated, need maybe to do something like an assessment, the way it's done at the FDIC. Pool money together. Which I get very, very frustrated because this is what Sam Bankman-Fried was promoting, that I was so proud of him for before this all unraveled, because he was going around saying, right, he was going to buy Celsius and Voyager and make the customers right. And it turned out his own house wasn't even in order. So to me, that whole thing is disgusting. But that idea is the right idea, right? How do you maybe protect the customers if you're going to have these just global conglomerate crypto exchanges? So I think it comes down to just the too big to fail. You have to manage it if it's going to just influence a large amount of customers. I do think the wallet issue is going to be the issue in this year in terms of the fight over whether unhosted wallets should be regulated. Because Senator Elizabeth Warren put out a bill, which, by the way, it's more of a signal bill, but it's trying to say to the Treasury that you should be regulating people's use of self-hosted wallets, and that everybody should have to go to BSA laws, even if you're, just a node. Like
Enforcing that's going to be particularly hard.
Yeah, and I think they'll realize it misses because they don't want to enforce the whole system. I've seen regulators twist things around in a way that just baffle me. Like the person that was running to be the head of the OCC, she ended up not getting nominated, but she actually had a paper out. And the paper was arguing why Lightning was illegal. And it was saying the Lightning Network is actually just the way they were doing it on Wall Street, because they're taking it off chain. So because it's not on the blockchain, they're obfuscating those funds. And I'm like, does she even know the amounts of money that go back and forth between people on Lightning?
Yeah.
Like you're going after the wrong crowd. Like, and it just, but she was trying to basically say, like, because it obfuscates, that somehow Lightning nodes should be under more regulatory scrutiny. And that drives me nuts. But
I mean, you can make an argument it's still on chain.
Yes.
That Bitcoin still exists on a chain.
Well,
It's
Bitcoin
just
still
locked in.
exists. It's just locked in motion. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but what upset me was that she was trying to make the analogy of, well, that's what we did with the mortgages, right? They created a derivative of, so it's like a derivative of Bitcoin that people are then trading. So then it could create. And I was just like, the problem, I'll say this about my fellow regulators, the risk of like them not being nice to me at the next like cocktail party I go to, which is like some of the stuff, you can't compare everything to the 2008 financial crisis. Mm-hmm. And when you start looking at it through that lens, you shouldn't be looking at Lightning through that lens. That's the biggest problem, I think, is the government still views it as it's either terrorists or money launderers that are using this money. And because they're able to put that in a typology, they go after the things like the Bitcoin ATMs. They go after the, mixers and tumblers of the world. That's their targets, because in their minds, that's the thing that can really cause damage. But they're breaking things. That's the problem. Like they're breaking things because they're making it illegal, like with Tornado Cash or whatever. Like, and I just think that there's so much education that still needs to happen, and also buy-in that like Bitcoin's actually a good thing. And that's the fight that David Zell and BPI is doing. That's why I support them with that, because that's something people need to realize is Bitcoin isn't just a bad thing. I'll tell you, I was going to the Hill, and I won't mention who the people were, and I won't mention who the congressperson was, but I was trying to explain a little bit about what Bitcoin was, and the person there was doing the same thing. But they were very aggressive. They were very upset about it. They actually thought that by people allowing Bitcoin to be used in the United States, we'd be vulnerable to North Korea. North Korea could come in and take over the U.S. And then they said to me, and with a straight face, and this is with the congressperson and 3 of their aides, and they're looking at me and they go, okay, well, we need you to do one thing. I'm like, what's that? They go, tell us who the president of Bitcoin is. So I said quickly, which was my first mistake, I go, there is no president of Bitcoin. And I realized that's not going to work here because they kept asking me. They thought I was hiding who. So I said to them, I said, okay, well, you know the Federal Reserve? Think of the Federal Reserve, but it's like a closed system. Bitcoin's like a replacement for that, but it's an open system. And there was a little bit of buy-in. They still thought I was hiding who the president of Bitcoin was. So there's just so much educational efforts, like they're still stuck in 2011.